Hi everyone, welcome back to the Art of Save Scumming. Today we're going to be finishing up our series on Tzeentch, the Oracles of Tzeentch, led by Kairos Fateweaver, this guy right here. This is part 3, and we're going to be talking about army compositions for this faction. Now, normally when we're talking about army compositions for various factions, what we're talking about is that mid to late game stack, maybe a couple different variations on those that you're going to be able to use to take over the map. Well, in my opinion, for the Oracles of Tzeentch, there's really only one army composition, and you're going to do different variations on this army depending on what stage of the campaign you're at or what you have access to. So what do we got going on here? We have an army led by an exalted Lord of Change. This so happens to be Total, which is the Lord that you save at the beginning of the campaign if you feel so inclined. He's not particularly high level. I've just kind of had him in my back pocket. These guys are really good because they are siege attackers. Moving on to our hero here, this is an iridescent horror. Again, not particularly high level. Ultimately, their purpose is to be a magic battery. Same thing with our hero, but our hero in the form of this cultist of Tzeentch here has access to the lore of fire, which gives us a little bit different look from that lore of Tzeentch. He also increases the mobility and spreads corruption. So one of the things about using any of the demon lords is you're doing this whole the great game thing, and you want to make sure that you're on top as often as possible so that you can get access to more powerful unholy manifestations. Moving on from there, our front line is made up of chosen. If you're earlier in the campaign, you're using chaos warriors or you're using marauders of Tzeentch, something like that. You can also use blue horrors. The thing about blue horrors is that they're pretty squishy, but they get that missile attack. So you could also perhaps have this front line divided between a front and second line that is melee units only out front, and then you've got a small line of blue horrors to soften up the enemy before we really start getting going, and then after they use up that ammunition, they can go in. All the while, the back row of pink horrors are just throwing their stuff all over the place. This is an exalted pink horror line, and they're going to make up our back line in this instance. And then we're also going to want some kind of something that can go out and disrupt things like artillery and missile units. If you're earlier in the campaign, you might be using the Screamers of Tzeentch, or you might be using the Furies, depending on what level of settlements you have access to and what your budget looks like. And then in the back, we're going to have some kind of heavy damage dealer, and in this case we have 2 soul grinders, but if you're earlier in the campaign, you're going to be either using exalted flamers of Tzeentch or flamers of Tzeentch. So let's go ahead and hop into this battle. This is actually going to be one of the things that Tzeentch really doesn't do well with, which is a siege battle. Alright, now that we're all lined up, we're just going to charge it in. We're going to take our chosen. These guys are going to go for the gate. These ones are going to go up on the walls. As I mentioned, did we line these guys up? No, these guys need lined up. And then we're going to just start bombarding everything that we can with those guys. Take our Lord of Change, go ahead and let him park on the wall there. The iridescent horror is very mobile because it's on a disc of Tzeentch. And then we might use that burning head. We are going up against Skaven, so this is going to be pretty effective on the fire spells. And we're just going to sit here and spam magic. Trying to move those guys out from where they can get hit by that tower. Now, at this point in time, this hero here does not have his summons. So right now we would be probably dropping those summons off inside the walls of this settlement, but we don't currently have them. And this was a good opportunity to showcase a siege battle that I may not fight with an army like this for, 20 more turns, so I thought this was a good opportunity to film. You can see that the Chosen have made it up on the walls. They're really not taking very much damage at all. We really just need to watch out for this Iridescent Horror here. Ideally, we would have this guy on his Chaos War Shrine. Again, he's not high enough level. Oops, those guys are in trouble. Some factions take on the siege battles differently than others. If I'm playing as Tzeentch, for instance, I'm taking that point right there and basically just keeping people out of it until I cap the settlement. As the Oracles of Tzeentch, I would say that basically you play it as an annihilation battle. And your whole goal is just to cause the army losses. I don't know what's going on over here, but whatever. So we're just going to take these soul grinders here and use them to bombard these infantry. We're pretty close to the army losses, I think. And that should pretty much push it over the edge. The other thing you can do with the Lords of Change, they're fairly resistant. So if you find a blob of infantry... Let's see, those are maybe worth... What do we want? We'll go ahead and just do this. So I'm guessing that these are storm vermin. If we can convince... Yeah, there we go. So now that we've got our Lord of Change engaged, we can drop our army ability. And they're fairly resistant to physical attacks, and so that's going to pin that section of infantry down and allow us to basically just destroy it. Alright, there it is. I underestimated how long they were going to hang out. So, minimal casualties. It looks to me like those were basically all the Doom Knights that I forgot to pay attention to. And, yeah, so that was a settlement battle with what I'm going to say is probably the major army composition that you're going to use for the Oracles of Tzeentch. Basically, we're going to replenish almost a full from that one battle. So, things that we don't currently have. We would want this hero on this War Shrine because he gains the special abilities that are associated with Chaos War Shrines. We would also put all our points into the Gate of Tzeentch and the Greater Gate of Tzeentch. The thing about your Cultists of Tzeentch, now that there are 50 points available, you can basically get every point in this skill tree and you'll have one left over. So it doesn't really matter what you go after. You can get it all eventually, but in my opinion, you should go heavy into the corruption and the increased mobility first, then start down the magic line, and then as these things become available, you want to pick up, you'll get this automatically, but you want to pick up this and this as soon as they become available. As far as the Iridescent Horror is concerned, you don't really need the control, so if you wanted to go and use this as a magic caster, then I would say that go with the training whenever you have access to it, but then start running down that magic line and then, of course, pick one of these. I think these guys do exceptionally well paired with a Lord of Change or other caster lord that's in the Lore of Metal, because the Lore of Metal, while it's fairly powerful, unfortunately, because of the way the game is currently configured, it's pretty hard to hit things with it in the open field. You have to have those units pinned down versus the Lore of Tzeentch. You basically got a 100% hit rate as long as you aren't doing something dumb. Keep in mind that this is a fairly expensive army. It's not the most expensive army, but a 10,000 favor upkeep is fairly expensive as far as armies are concerned. If you look at this army over here that Kairos is running, that is a little bit farther down in the tier, This would be a good example of something that you would run just before you got to that. You got a little bit of a front line with a secondary front line that can just throw their missiles and then go into combat with your true back line, and again, your tie-up units and your quote-unquote artillery units or high damage dealers. You can see that this is basically the same army. The major thing when it comes to Tzeentch fighting field battles is you're going to be relying very heavily on this function here to keep your magic high and use your lore to do maximum damage before your army ends up as just a cleanup army. In this particular instance, this was a siege battle, so we did a lot more fighting than we would normally have to with the army. But keep in mind that the majority of your damage dealing is going to come from your lords in the Tzeentch faction. If you enjoyed this video, sound off in the comment section down below, and if you would feel so inclined, if you could subscribe to the channel, that helps a great deal because, well, I'm trying to get over that 1,000 mark so that I can monetize the channel, and we all know that monetization helps the videos go farther. So thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on a future video here at The Art of Scumming.